evening. I'm Donna Bartlett May with the League of Women Voters of San Diego, and I will be your moderator for tonight's virtual candidate forum. This mayoral forum is sponsored by the Bankers Hill Community Group. Claremont Town Council has joined them to co-host. These virtual forums have had the positive effect of allowing more of you to join us and hear the candidates answer your questions. The League is proud to be a nonpartisan organization, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties. Our Voters Edge website is your online resource for more information about the candidates, ballot issues, and detailed voting information. All candidates have been invited to include their information at no cost to them, and both candidates tonight have provided their information. The link to Voters Edge and all other websites mentioned tonight will be in the chat. The League moderates candidate forums using a format that is fair and balanced, just informative. We have asked the candidates to answer the questions rather than make personal attacks because our goal is for the voters to be able to learn more about the candidates than they can get from campaign ads and social media. We are recording this forum and it will be available unedited from beginning to end on our website, lwvsandiego.org. We asked you all to submit questions online before the forum, but you may also submit questions using the link provided in the chat box. Please remember to use civility and respect in wording your questions and frame them so both candidates can answer. The questions will be organized to assure topics of greatest interest are asked. Assisting tonight as lead question screeners are Jeannie Brown and Francesca Wiedemeyer, and the screener from the Bankers Hill Community Group is Amy Hayes. The timekeeper is League member Scarlett Lopez, and we plan to adjourn by 8 p.m. This is the forum for the San Diego City Mayor. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for their closing, and 1 minute to respond to each question from the audience. We will alternate who answers questions first. Barbara Bree will have the first opening statement, and Todd Gloria will have the first closing statement. Barbara, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight. I've been a member for many, many years, and I look forward to being a member for many more years to come. After a career in business and the nonprofit world, I ran for City Council in 2016 because I was frustrated that the street in front of my office was being torn up yet again. When I arrived at City Hall, I found a culture of no accountability and no transparency, a place where major decisions were made behind closed doors. And I stood up to it. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo. I was the first elected official to oppose the Soccer City land grab, and I held together a fragile council coalition to get SDSU West done. I was thrilled to attend the groundbreaking in August, and this truly is one of the most transformative projects in our region in decades. It just shows that with the right leadership, we can get big things done. I demanded an independent audit of the water department after customers were being overbilled and weren't being taken seriously, and we'd be here till midnight if I detailed everything that went wrong. And of course, there is 101 Ash Street. My priorities as mayor are to lead an inclusive economic recovery with a focus on job creation, which is why my private sector experience is so important. To protect our neighborhoods, to promote growth along transit corridors. I do not support the elimination of single-family zoning, which my opponent does. It is fair to point out honest policy differences between the two of us, and to develop a comprehensive public safety strategy that makes San Diego once again a national leader in neighborhood policing. And of course, clean up the mess at City Hall.
Thank you. Todd?
Thank you so much, Kim, for moderating. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Bankers Hill Community Group as well as the Claremont Town Council for creating this opportunity, and of course, for having the gold standard of moderation with the League of Women Voters. I'm really encouraged by the large number of folks who've tuned in this evening. I know in this difficult time that we find ourselves in, where you're concerned about your personal health and the health of your family and loved ones, to your finances and whether or not you have a job or your spouse or family members have jobs, to, of course, the many people who are marching in our streets to demand justice. There are many demands of your time. And the fact that you would give your evening to listen to Councilmember Bree and I share our respective visions for our city really means that we all care about San Diego. We love it deeply and we want it to be better. And that's precisely why I'm running for mayor. In my observation, we face many challenges as a city, issues as big as homelessness and housing affordability to real issues like vacation rentals and scooters. But the main issue that we face is that too often San Diego is a big city that masquerades as a small town. Whether that's the fact that we have the eighth largest city in the United States, but the fifth largest homeless population, where we're spending more on this issue than we ever have, and yet we're not seeing the results that we want, to the fact that we have an international airport and a light rail system that are literally next to one another, but they don't connect. You see examples of this small town thinking all around us. And probably most prominently, and for many of you who are watching tonight, this may be your main concern, is housing affordability. Whether or not we are a city that will have a thriving working and middle class, or whether we'll just be a city for the very wealthy who can afford to live here and the very poor who are trapped here. I'm offering a vision of a big city, a city that ends chronic homelessness, that builds a world-class transportation system and tackles our housing affordability crisis for our children and our grandchildren. I look forward to sharing more of my vision with you this evening, and thank you again for tuning in to this important conversation.
Thank you, both of you. Now to our questions. Some have been submitted prior, and if you do, I'll remind you, want to submit questions, please just go to the link in the chat. We'll start with some nice general questions, and we'll start with you, Todd. What do you see as the pros and cons of the strong mayor system in San Diego?
It's a great question, Donna. So I campaigned against the strong mayor form of government back when it was on the ballot quite a while ago. And I think that from those who supported that measure, they represented that there would be greater accountability for mistakes that were made or challenges that we were facing. And I just don't think that that has happened, largely because the personality that is currently in that office, where you don't see the elected officials taking responsibility that is often blamed on staff. So its purported best feature has not really been experienced. What I would observe is what I can bring to this role. If elected, I'd be the first former council president to serve as mayor. I won't forget my time on the city council, recognizing the importance of being present at public meetings as well as in the community and working with the legislative branch to move our city forward. Again, I won't forget those lessons as the next mayor of San Diego, and hope that we can make this system, the system was sold to voters on a series of promises of accountability and transparency, real.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes, very good question. Thank you. I think the major advantage of the strong mayor system is that the CEO of the city can have a vision for the city and play a key role in moving that vision forward by who she puts in key positions around her. And what I plan to do as mayor, as a strong mayor, is bring new voices into City Hall. My team will represent the diversity of our city. And I want to make sure that the key leaders of departments in the city are professionals, not political appointees. I think the major advantage of the city manager system was that there were professionals leading key departments. And as people look back at the city manager form of government, some people believe that service to residents was better. But as a woman who has, been in business, signed the front of the paycheck, I believe the city needs to be accountable to its residents, and a strong mayor can make that happen.
Thank you very much. Barbara, we'll start this next question with you. If elected, how will your constituents experience the realization of your yard sign slogans, in your case, #ForAllOfUs, and that's Todd's slogan, and in your case, Barbara, solutions, not empty promises?
So excellent question. And I think you can see that my life has been about coming up with solutions, not just making a promise. That's why I'm so proud of SDSU West, which when I opposed Soccer City back in February of 2017, it looked like a done deal. But I saw that that was not the solution for the land in Mission Valley. And I stood up, I opposed it, I became part of an organized effort to defeat Soccer City and to pass a competing measure called SDSU West. As mayor, I'm going to work with the community and make sure that we cut through the bureaucracy. Right now, our development services department is in turmoil, and we need to provide excellent customer service to our residents if we're going to move the city forward. And we need to get people into people into a room to resolve complex issues and not let things drag out, which happens over and over again at City Hall.
Thank you very much, Todd.
So for all of us is more than a hashtag. It's a philosophy that I've had where I recognize that in my current role as an assembly member, I have the honor and the responsibility of representing almost 500,000 Californians. As a city council member, I had a similar attitude of recognizing I'd represent communities as diverse as downtown and City Heights. And you have to be able to service all those communities as well as possible. For all of us, in my mind, means that you have a mayor that fights for you and for every neighborhood in this city, that you recognize that your administration must be reflective of the diversity of this city in order to properly serve it. That for all of us means that we can't have different outcomes for neighborhoods south of the 8 compared to the neighborhoods north of the 8. And that's inclusive of the educational outcomes for our children in our public schools. It's a recognition that a mayor needs to show up in every community with regularity, to be accessible and to hear from people directly. I have done that throughout my public career. I'm known as one of the most accessible elected officials in San Diego. That will not change if I'm elected to be your next mayor.
Thank you very much. The next question, Todd, we'll start with you. What is your viewpoint on rent control should Proposition 21 pass this year?
So I'm opposed to rent control, and I'm opposed to that proposition. I have supported a rent cap, which is an attempt to address excessive rent gouging. We have seen in my assembly district rental increases of over 75% where no improvements were made to the property, really an effort to exploit the experiences of families who are struggling to make ends meet in a hot housing market. The legislation I supported in Sacramento is statewide in scope. That is different than local rent control measures. It allows for an escalator of cost of living plus roughly 3%. I'm sorry, 5% plus cost of living. It does not apply to new construction in order to not inhibit new housing growth. And it resets every time a tenant leaves. I think this is a sensible approach. It's a compromise that we worked very hard on in Sacramento, and it's representative of our efforts to really bring different groups together around an issue to get real progress for San Diegans and for Californians. I support that. I do not support rent control.
Thank you, Barbara.
I'm also against rent control. This is something my opponent and I agree on, although I do believe the state bill that he voted for was really rent control disguised in the name of rent stabilization. Rent control simply doesn't work. What I am for is building more housing that working families can afford. And with the pandemic, we're going to have opportunities for adaptive reuse of office and commercial space, which is much less expensive than building new housing. As a council member, I have supported increased density along transit, and I will continue to do that. And there are many other things I want to do, including developing a down payment assistance plan for first-time home buyers. This is how we're going to provide housing for more San Diegans. Rent control is not the answer.
Thank you. Let's get into some economic questions, one specifically on the pension system. What are some of your ideas that could address our city's overburdened pension system? Barbara?
So first of all, I did vote in 2012 for what is known as Proposition B, which put all city employees except for police officers into a 401k type program. It has been found to be illegal, and I do support taking it out of the city charter so we can move on and negotiate with our labor unions something that is fair to both them and to the taxpayers. As mayor, I will only accept a 401k type pension. That's the system I'm in right now. My opponent was in the guaranteed pension program when he was a city council member. I believe if he were mayor, I've seen that if he were mayor for 8 years, that his pension could cost the taxpayers almost $2 million.
Thank you. Todd?
So back in 2012, when Proposition B was on the ballot, I opposed that measure. It wasn't a popular thing to do, but then I could see what others could not see, which is that this was not a solution for San Diego. And I'm sad to say that over time, I've been proven correct. The only folks who benefited from this are the attorneys who charged millions of dollars in legal fees. Instead, rather of a solution, as the public was promised, what we've seen are higher and higher pension bills. Again, remembering that this is a distinction in this race between those who could see a mistake before it happened and those who went along with it, and with people like Carl DeMaio who advanced it. This has obviously been ruled invalid. It's going to fall into the next mayor's lap along with a host of other issues. My commitment is to bargain in good faith with our employee units, not to resurrect the unsustainable pensions of the past, but to create a defined benefit program that is affordable for the city, but provides respect and dignity in retirement for our city workers. I think that that is something that most other cities are able to navigate. We should be able to do it too.
Thank you. The next question is also on the economy. What would be your first action as mayor to rebuild San Diego's economy? Todd?
Well, I would ask you all to go to toddgloria.com, where I recently published my report, Back to Work SD. This was a collaborative effort done over many months with a task force of over 30 local leaders from all segments of our economy, from our healthcare sector, the public and private, our military community, and others. And it's a comprehensive vision of what I would do as your next mayor. You asked what would I do initially. Well, our first day in office, we're going to have to rebuild the ranks of the city's executive staff. I would note that today, the city's chief operating officer has resigned with basically 3 months left in the term. That means it's a situation very similar to when I took over as mayor as last time, when there were no executives left. They'd all been run out of City Hall by the previous mayor. And I was tasked with trying to fill all of those positions. I was able to do it. I did it with quality individuals who led our city well, so well that our existing mayor kept them on when he took over. I believe I have an eye for talent, and that's the first thing I would do, which is to recruit the best people to help me run the administration and move our city forward.
Thank you. Barbara?
Thank you. Yes, I saw that my opponent released his plan a few days ago. We released our plan in June. I felt it was urgent that we address what we call our roadmap to recovery, which I worked on with a diverse group of small business owners and community leaders. I believe that San Diego can build on our strengths, our diverse population, our great universities, our thriving tech and biotech industries, our proximity to the border, our vibrant cultural sector, our beautiful natural environment, and our many unique neighborhoods. My roadmap to recovery is available on my website. It includes universal internet access for small businesses and families, and essential in today's world. It includes a focus with growing tech and biotech, the worlds I come out of, which create good paying jobs and good service sector jobs around them, and a school engagement coordinator who I will hire at the beginning to develop relationships with employers so that as they grow up, our young people, particularly south of 8, will have access to good paid internships.
Thank you. Barbara, the next question, we'll start with you. Do you support the current minimum wage and the scheduled increases?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Todd?
Well, I wrote the ordinance and got it passed by the voters. So yes, I do.
Thank you. Todd, we'll start with you. What steps will you take to secure a hunger-free San Diego?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I have worked for many years with our food bank and with Feeding San Diego and other nonprofits who've done an exceptional job of really innovating in this space. I would encourage any of the viewers to familiarize yourself with those organizations. A recent innovation that I think is magnificent is the food bank has partnered with several dozen smaller nonprofits in every corner of the city in order to allow them to operate as super pantries so that you have more direct access and more frequent access to nutritious food. Again, in trusted settings. These are nonprofits that already work in neighborhoods, and therefore adding this food component as allowing them to serve better various neighborhoods. I think collaborations like that, largely funded by government grants and philanthropy, is a great way to continue to expand and address the issue of hunger in our communities, which is a real issue. It's also going to take additional advocacy in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and I think my experience in the public sector makes me the best qualified to do that.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes, no one in San Diego should go hungry. It is unacceptable. As mayor, I will work with our food banks. I will also work with the county to make sure that everyone who is eligible gets access to CalFresh, which hasn't always been the case. I will also work closely with our school system, which has done a good job during the pandemic of supplying meals to many San Diego families, even though the school children haven't been physically in school. So I view this as a collaborative effort between the mayor's office, the county, and the nonprofit community to make sure that no San Diegan goes hungry.
Thank you. Barbara, we'll start with you. Do you support the issuance of affordable housing bonds, and why or why not?
So I did vote to put Measure A on the ballot because I knew I was the swing vote, that if I didn't vote for it, it wasn't going to happen. During that hearing, several of my colleagues expressed concern about the impact on their residents, specifically Georgette Gomez, Vivian Moreno, and Monica Montgomery, concern about the homeowners and renters in their communities and how this would impact them. I've still not decided if I'm going to vote yes or no on it personally, but I did vote to put it on the ballot because I think San Diegans deserve the option of what they want to do. At the same time, I'm developing other ideas because 2/3 is a very high threshold on how we can provide a more affordable housing. And adaptive reuse is one way that this can happen.
Thank you. Todd?
So I do support Measure A, and I would encourage folks who are viewing to vote in favor of Measure A this November. It is nearly $1 billion to help create thousands of additional housing units that are affordable to low and very low income San Diegans, as well as the formerly homeless. When we consider the, I think, tragedy that is the thousands of San Diegans that will sleep tonight outdoors, unsheltered, we have to do something. And this measure is of the scale that is necessary to bring change on this particular issue. I also think that it's important to have a permanent local funding source like Measure A to allow us to go to partners at the state and federal government to ask them to leverage funds with us to create additional units that are, again, are affordable to the community. Regardless of whether or not we do adaptive reuse, we absolutely have to have a subsidy to allow the rents to stay affordable to the low income and vulnerable populations we're talking about. Measure A is that solution. You should support Measure A this November.
Thank you. Todd, we'll start this next question with you. If you're elected mayor, what will you do about 101 Ash Street?
Well, I think it's important to leave all options on the table. The city apparently, and I don't have the benefit of serving on the council currently to know what's going on in closed session. I imagine Councilmember Bree does. But what I do know is that we should be vigorous in defending the interest of taxpayers. That includes litigation, exploring options for rehabilitation, and even the potential sale of the property. You know, when we purchased this building a number of years ago, we did it with the intent of ceasing being renters and instead being owners. This building was a home for a Fortune 500 company, and we intended to move in it right away. Instead, it sat vacant for nearly 2 years. It was supposed to save us $40 million. The current city council voted to remodel the building at a cost of $30 million, essentially wiping out most of the savings. And in the process, exposed asbestos has rendered the building not usable, at least for now. Obviously, we have to, again, vigorously defend the taxpayers' interest in this matter. I promise I will do that. We will also make sure that we reimagine the real estate assets department that is clearly lacking, as evidenced by the multiple bad land deals that have been done in recent years.
Thank you. Barbara?
Thank you. And first of all, there are a lot of interested parties who would like to resolve the 101 Ash Street issue, and we read about more of them every day. And as mayor, I'm going to get them all into the room, and I'm optimistic that we can work out an agreement. If we have lawsuits, the only people who win are the attorneys. But let's remember, my opponent enthusiastically supported this purchase. The public testimony back in 2016 says that. Here's the indemnity language, which was extraordinary, indemnified the seller from everything. No rational buyer would ever have done that. And the city paid over the appraisal price. And that's why there was this complicated lease purchase agreement, which actually the city can't refinance without onerous penalties. And if this deal was done because of Mr. Gloria, because of the special interest pushing it, and the city should never have been put in the situation that it's in today.
Thank you very much. Barbara, the next one, we'll start with you. Would you support, or do you support, Mayor Faulkner's complete communities development proposal?
I like to call his proposal the incomplete communities proposal or the completely ignored communities proposal. during a pandemic is not the time to push through a major land use change when you can't have meaningful public input. So as mayor, I want to look at how it's appropriate to move forward with future development with a focus on what we have been doing, what this council has been doing, which is updating community plans along transit and giving developers by right certainty about where they can develop appropriately, which brings down the cost of housing. In addition, revamping our development services department to make sure that it provides customer service and that it shortens the length of time to get permits.
Thank you, Todd.
So I think the notion of complete communities could use some modifications. Specifically, some of the unlimited height components I think are troublesome. I think some of the affordability percentages could be adjusted, but to the extent that it's attempting to address a citywide problem of both housing, infrastructure, mobility, parks, and fees, developer fees, I do think all of those are worthy of revision and reconsideration. I think working with the city council and with neighborhoods like those that are participating tonight, this proposal could be made better. It could be made palatable to the community. I think it's important to recognize that every community has to do its part when it comes to addressing our infrastructure and housing deficits, not just select communities where maybe a politician doesn't actually live, but in every community has to do its part. I think communities are trying to address that. I'm particularly supportive of the ideas of making sure that our developer fees are assessed appropriately to make sure the infrastructure is there to facilitate and preserve quality of life as we deal with new housing coming into neighborhoods.
Thank you. Todd, we'll start the next one with you. Do you support Measure E, which increases the height limit in the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan area?
I do, but probably more importantly, so does the community. The Midway community, which I'm honored to represent in the legislature, has worked hard and is very supportive of this. And much like the neighborhoods that are on this Zoom, I believe that you would hope that if you were supportive of a measure, other neighborhoods would do the same. But importantly, I think that this is an opportunity to make the city-owned asset, the sports arena site, generate more revenue to the city. Whoever the next mayor is was done no favors by the current city council. They're going to have a massive budget deficit on their hands. And the idea of making sure that we have resources, I'm sure the Chili's land lease that's there is making the city some money, but I'm sure we could do better in terms of creating the revenue that we can then put into repairing roads, preserving neighborhood services, and keeping neighborhoods safe. But importantly, this measure is supported by the neighborhoods, and one of the reasons why I support Measure E.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, I will be voting no on Measure E. I view it as spot zoning, and it did not take into account the adjoining neighborhoods that will be greatly impacted by what happens on that site. First of all, Navwar is going to be redeveloped. There are no height limits there because it's federal land. In addition, the old post office site is going to be redeveloped, and all of that should have been considered. The City Council did update the Midway Community Plan a few years ago. That would have been the correct time to talk about raising the 30-foot height limit and the impact it would have had on the surrounding community. It was not brought up at that time, and I will be voting no on Measure E.
Thank you. Barbara, we'll start with you. How do you plan to equip Bankers Hill as the population density increases there? For example, getting them additional parks or a grocery store?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's one thing that should be taken. I understand the community plan was updated shortly before I joined the council, and that it was a very contentious meeting, and that some members of the community feel that their desires weren't listened to, but it was before I was on the council. And this community a lot of development is happening in this community, which I think in the long run is a good thing, given where this community is located, near downtown, near Balboa Park, on a transit corridor, near the airport. And I will work with the community to develop, identify appropriate sites for community amenities like a grocery store, which is a necessity actually, and more parks.
Thank you. Todd?
Well, I believe the Uptown Community Plan update, of which Bankers Hill was a part of, is inclusive of the kind of change that can actually facilitate the attraction of a grocery store to that community. Since its adoption, we've seen a CVS come into the neighborhood. It's not a grocery store, but it's indicative of the fact that the interest is there from the private sector. And what it takes is leadership, both a mayor and a council member who's willing to work with the private sector to say, we want you to locate here. This is a great neighborhood. This is an area of great opportunity. The point was mentioned about parks. Well, there are a number of parks that have come online recently or are soon to come online. I'm thinking of Olive Street Park. I was proud to play a role in making sure that project continued to move forward. And we know that in this city, we charge developer fees in order to help facilitate the payment or the financing of things like parks. Again, the community plan update and attracting new development that creates the fees that helps us to build the parks. That's how we can get that done for Bankers Hill.
Thank you. Next question for you. Do you support Measure B regarding the Independent Commission on Police Practices?
I do, and I strongly ask everyone watching that you vote yes on Measure B. I think this is a necessary step to enjoy the trust of the communities that we protect and serve at a time when you see people marching in the streets and many of us saying very clearly and unequivocally that Black Lives Matter. This is, I think, an effort to really show that we will hold bad police officers accountable, that there will be transparency and accountability in the police department. And so if you believe in all those things, then you must vote yes on this ballot measure. And my commitment to you as the next mayor of San Diego is that despite the challenging budget environment that I will enter, that we will make sure that we fund this appropriately, that we make sure that the intent of the voters is understood. This will not be any small feat. The creation of investigators, subpoena power, attorneys, these will all be fairly expensive things, but I believe that it is money well spent. And again, to avoid some of the worst that we see in other communities and to enjoy the trust of the neighborhoods we're honored to serve.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes. This is an issue on which my opponent and I agree, the importance of an independent police review commission. I've supported it since 2018 when Women Occupy first brought the concept to me. At that time, there were only 4 of us who voted to put it on the ballot, so it didn't make it onto the 2018 ballot. This time, it was unanimous. And I'm honored that Andrea St. Julian, the president of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association and the author of that measure, has endorsed me for mayor because she realized that I stuck my political neck out in 2018 when I supported it because I believed it was so important in building trust between the community and law enforcement, that community members would know there was a safe place to turn if they were a victim of abuse. And as mayor, I will make sure that the department gets the resources, the commission gets the resources it needs. I think it will more than pay for itself because it will reduce the number of lawsuits that the city faces because of policing that shouldn't have happened.
Thank you. We have some questions, excuse me, on the SDG&E issue. Do you support signing another long-term contract with SDG&E, and why or why not?
Yeah, so this is the franchise extension of the franchise agreement. At this time, I feel this was a rushed agreement. The mayor waited until the end of the process to get started on seeking a new franchisee for the city. And what I have supported all along is a delay of at least a year. San Diego Gas and Electric will continue providing gas and electric services on January 1 if we don't have an agreement. This is such an important decision that we need to get it right. I'm optimistic that the mayor will reconsider putting out an invitation to bid and will extend San Diego Gas and Electric up before the election.
Thank you. Todd?
So this is an interesting issue because the franchise agreement for SDG&E in the city has been in place for 50 years. So to reference this as some sort of a rush deal, they had literally half a century to be prepared to make sure that there was not a need for an extension. So this is sort of speaks to the competence level at City Hall currently, both this and with our ambulance contract, which is also a subject of some contracting irregularities. What I would say is that, of course, we should take the time to get it done right. If that means a short-term extension to make sure that we negotiate either with SDG&E or any other bidder who comes forward, we should do that. This is a lot of money. This is very important stuff. But make no mistake, this is not cost-free. The potential of reducing and losing funds that are necessary from our franchise agreements, the number 5 largest revenue source to the city, in the context of a bad economy with a massive budget deficit, these are real issues, and it's a price that we are paying for the, again, lack of diligence by current city leaders.
Thank you. We have several requests on parks and bike lanes. Do you believe that parking on 30th Street should be removed for bike lanes? Todd?
So I always think these things are false choices. And I say this as someone with some experience. For the folks who live in Hillcrest, you remember the parking reductions that were envisioned along University Avenue when we introduced a protected or buffered bike lane on that street, to the loss of parking that was proposed on Park Boulevard in Hillcrest North Park when we were installing the bus rapid transit lane. In both of those instances, as your city council member, I was able to roll up my sleeves, work with different parties to come together, and we didn't actually lose parking spaces in either part of the community. We actually gained additional parking spaces by deleting old driveways, overly large red zones, and going to angle parking on side streets. I believe that we can do something similar in North Park to facilitate a protected bikeway that will keep people safe if they want to bicycle in the community, but still provide plenty of parking in the community. I think that that's what the community should strive for. And I think my past experiences finding success and really meeting people on both sides of the issue can be replicated in North Park.
Thank you. Barbara?
This is real. I have visited 30th Street several times. I have talked with small business owners and residents. They will be devastated if 400 parking spaces are lost in their community. And there is a resolution. It's called Utah Street, which is 2 blocks over, which already has very nice bike lanes. So why the city is feeling the need to eliminate 400 parking spaces on 30th Street when 2 blocks over is a wonderful alternative already in place, I simply do not understand. And as mayor, I'm going to make rational decisions based on data and work with the community to get things done.
Thank you. Another question, now that e-scooters are appearing on our streets again, do you support increasing the regulation for the safety of the riders and the pedestrians? Barbara?
So what's very frustrating is that the city passes an ordinance and then doesn't enforce it. For example, they are illegal on the beach boardwalks, but the city doesn't enforce it. One of the reasons I'm running for mayor is because I realized as a council member, I had limited authority to get things done. If we're going to pass an ordinance, and I fully supported regulating this industry, we need to enforce it. There are some simple things we can do. We can put license plates on scooters. We can issue tickets for scooters that are illegally parked and go illegal places. We do it for cars all the time. And this is a public safety issue for pedestrians, for the scooter riders themselves, and for motorists. So it's very important. I see enforcement issues all over the city. We don't enforce the existing municipal code against short-term rentals. So as I visit neighborhoods all over the city, and I'm doing it every weekend, I hear constant frustration about you pass a law and you don't enforce it. And as mayor, I'm going to enforce our existing laws.
Thank you. Todd?
So I agree, enforcement is an issue. You know, and it's interesting to me what the city chooses to enforce. You may have seen the news story over the weekend where some chalk art in La Jolla, referencing Black Lives Matter, was immediately removed by the city because that kind of enforcement apparently has a priority. But prioritizing enforcement against scooters that may be riding illegally on sidewalks or in other ways that are not compatible with the municipal code gets overlooked. That is poor prioritization by City Hall and is an embarrassment for our city. There was a time when we had 200 illegal marijuana dispensaries in our city. I worked with the community to craft ordinance, enacted it over a referendum, and we were able to make sure that regulations were in place and that problem is not a problem in our city any longer. The city is capable of enforcing, and yes, we should do additional enforcement on e-scooters. We should charge those companies the full freight for making sure that we're enforcing against them and holding them accountable for bad behavior. But of course, this city can't accomplish that. I would point out most other cities are fully capable of doing it. My question is, why is it we can't do that here in San Diego? When I'm mayor, we will.
Thank you. We have a couple questions on Balboa Park. How would you ensure that the deferred maintenance of Balboa Park is addressed and that the future needs of the park will be taken care of? Todd?
Love the question. So, when I was on the city council, we developed the Balboa Park Conservancy, a notion of the fact that we could work with the private sector, engage philanthropic funds to address many of the needs in Balboa Park. That has not lived up to its expectation. There were some legal challenges when we created that particular conservancy, and I'm interested in revisiting that because I do believe that there are many, many San Diegans who, number one, love Balboa Park, number two, would be willing to make a contribution to improve the park, but number three, are not willing to write that check to the city of San Diego. The Conservancy is there to capture that willingness to engage and get the job done. The city, of course, should be a partner in this matter. The state and federal government ought to be a partner in this matter. Working with Senator Tony Atkins last year, we were able to get over $8 million for the park to restore the botanical building and to expand the cottages in the International Cottage section. So there are a multitude of ways to address this, but it starts with engaged mayoral leadership. I think that's leadership we haven't had in this recent administration.
Thank you, Barbara.
First of all, I do not support commercialization of the park. I do not support paid parking in the park, as my opponent did when he was on the city council. First, what Balboa Park needs is a unified governance structure. The Conservancy was started, but there's still many organizations in the park, and it's very confusing to philanthropists, to residents, to all of us about who makes the decision about what happens in the park. I have met with many of the groups in the park, and they are working toward a unified governance structure. As mayor, I'm going to continue that to make sure that the park speaks with one voice. Then we can think about a dedicated revenue stream. And I think bringing the county in as a partner is extremely important because this is a regional resource. And the model may be a joint powers authority similar to the San Diego River Park Board that I currently sit on.
Thank you. Just one more on Balboa Park. Should a donor come forward to fund the Jacobs plan for Balboa Park, would you support reopening the process to build it?
No.
Barbara?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought you.
Sorry, missed that.
No, I would not support it.
Okay, Todd?
No, I believe we can use donor funds more effectively to address other projects that are long needed in the park. I'm interested in reclaiming the Palisades section of the park, restoring ornamental fixtures that have been lost. I think we can do a number of improvements in the park that have more broad support, more universal support. That's where the focus should be, particularly for philanthropy.
Okay. Going back to just some general questions, you've covered some of this, but just generally, what experiences do you bring to the challenges of this office and how would it benefit the city?
With me?
Yes, sorry.
Just checking. So I think my life experience is what qualifies me to be mayor, next mayor of San Diego. I'm a native San Diegan. I'm a third generation San Diegan. I know where we have been as a city, and I have a vision for where I would like to take us. I'm the son of a working class family. My mom and my dad were, my mom was a maid, my dad was a gardener when they started out their life together. They were able to work hard, buy a home in San Diego, put their 2 kids through college, the first in our family to ever go. And I'm running because I know stories like that are nearly impossible today in San Diego. It was possible 30 years ago, but nearly impossible today. And I think you need a mayor who understands that and is willing to work their heart out to make sure that pathways of opportunity continue to exist. And I think that my experiences as a city council member, a council president, interim mayor, make me capable of doing this job. You don't have to guess if I can do the job of mayor. I did it for 8 months. I can do it for 8 years with your support on November 3rd.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. First of all, I think mayors get a 4-year term and then a second 4-year term if the voters want them to have it. I think the diversity of my life experiences differentiates me from my opponent who has spent his whole life either working in government or has an elected official. I've started companies. I've started 2 organizations that empower women, Athena San Diego and Run Women Run. And I've served on many nonprofit boards. As an entrepreneur, I've been told no over and over again in my life. And I believe that no is only a way station to yes. And that is going to be extremely important in changing the culture at City Hall, a culture that has no accountability, no transparency, where major decisions are made behind closed doors. And I have demonstrated over and over again that I will stand up to special interests, that I will represent the best interests of our neighborhoods and our residents, and that I will get things done, that I don't make empty promises, that I come up with solutions.
Thank you very much. Next question. Do you have a plan that includes creating green jobs? And if so, what does it entail? Barbara?
Yes, so that's why I think my private sector experience, particularly coming out of tech and biotech, which are two major growth industries, I see great entrepreneurial opportunities as we move forward with community choice energy, as we move forward with an ambitious climate action plan, that we can develop products and services in San Diego that can be sold all over the world. Early in my entrepreneurial career, I worked at a program called Connect, which has helped start hundreds of tech and biotech companies. And I think I can apply the lessons learned from that to helping new industries in San Diego emerge that will create good jobs for all San Diegans.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, it's called the Climate Action Plan. It's a document I'm proud to have written when I was interim mayor, where I worked to get a unanimous bipartisan vote of the city council to enact it in 2015. And it is now serves as basically the landmark climate action plan for the nation, a plan that seemed ambitious at the time. Some would call it an empty promise, but it's something we delivered upon, and has been replicated by other cities, the state of California. In fact, our 100% renewable energy goal is a central plank in Joe Biden's presidential platform. That's what San Diego can do when it chooses to lead. And I think San Diego should lead a whole lot more often. Embedded in that plan with the goal for renewable energy is a lot of good green jobs. In it, by having a world-class transportation system, those are green jobs. The innovation is going to start here in San Diego. Our goal is 2035. The state is 2045. We will have a 10-year head start on the rest of California. That is in the plan. That jobs, those innovation, the research, the education will happen here in San Diego. Those are green jobs.
Thank you. A sort of a follow-up. What new technology are you excited to use in improving the quality of life in San Diego? Todd?
What new well, this is actually a pretty good one, I have to say, for two community groups who I have attended meetings for years and years, and I recognize they actually are two very well-attended groups, but look at the count right now on your screen and see how many people are participating. When I think about trying to lead this city to stand up and realize its full potential, it's going to require the full participation of San Diegans. And so I hope that when the pandemic is over, and I hope that that's sooner rather than later, that we don't lose this device that allows parents of school-age children to participate at night in community meetings where decisions are made on their behalf, that folks with different abilities and different economic statuses can still have an equal voice with other folks in the community process. You know, I appreciate and I value and I honor the volunteers who make our town councils, our planning groups, our parking districts all work. But the fact is this technology we're using right now is a great equalizer and ensures that more voices are heard. That's what I'm talking about when I say for all of us, this is a good technology that must be kept after the pandemic.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes, I think, well, Zoom has changed all of our lives. Hopefully can help us meet our climate action plan goals, as many of us don't have to get in a car to go somewhere. I'm excited by a lot of the developments happening in the biotech industry and at UCSD. UCSD is pioneering battery technology, particularly making batteries that are renewable, that last longer. That's going to be essential in meeting our climate action plan goals as we move forward with more solar energy, because solar doesn't work at night. We need really good battery storage. UCSD is at the forefront of this. UCSD is also at the forefront of working on autonomous vehicles, which I think are going to be important as we develop smart highways, and autonomous vehicles are all electric. So again, cleaner for the environment. And mostly we should all be very proud that our San Diego biotech industry has been at the forefront of developing products related to COVID.
Thank you. Another question is, how do you plan to address the funding and development of additional mental health institutions for our city? Barbara?
So the county is the health agency for the region. They get money from the state and the federal government every year. It's I think, widely accepted that for many years they didn't do their job, and that is one reason we see an increase in the number of homelessness. But they are starting to get their act together in terms of providing more mental health beds. As mayor, I will work with them to make sure they do their part. At the convention center, where the city and the county have been working very effectively together to house homeless individuals, we have a better partnership and relationship than we've had in years, and we're able to get many of the individuals there the help that they need. And this collaboration needs to continue. And as mayor, I will meet with the Board of Supervisors on a regular basis to discuss how we can make this work in a more collaborative way. Because right now, we are not addressing all the needs of our community.
Thank you. Todd?
Well, I think it starts with this election and electing a new majority to the County Board of Supervisors. And I hope that for those of you that have that opportunity, that you will do that and give us a functional majority that cares about this issue, that prioritizes this issue as they have it historically. We have seen what Supervisor Nathan Fletcher can do by himself. Imagine if he had two partners in governing that actually would prioritize social needs generally, but mental health needs specifically. And I appreciate someone asking this question, because we recognize in our culture there is a stigma against discussing mental illness, and that's one of the primary ways we have to address this. I have throughout my career spoken out often about mental illness because it's affected in my family, and I understand how important it is to talk about this in public, but also to connect it to action. In the legislature, I've carried bills to try and force counties like ours to spend the money they have on mental health that they've been hoarding for years. If we had new leadership with a commitment to spending the money they already have, I promise you we could address many of the mental health concerns in our city. And I, as mayor, will make that a priority issue for my advocacy.
Thank you very much. We're bumping up against our adjournment time, so I want to say, before giving our candidates an opportunity to do their closing remarks, I want to thank everyone for attending and asking such good questions. There will be another live mayoral forum hosted by the League on October 15th. If your question didn't get asked today, and we did have quite a few questions, so some of them did not get asked, we tried to cover as many categories as we could today. I want to remind everyone to be sure that they're registered to vote and that your address is correct. You can go to sdvote.com and make sure you fill out your census form, my2020census.gov. And now for the candidates' closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Todd.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna, for moderating. Thank you all for watching. Again, your love for our city is evident when you can sit in front of your screen. You probably spend all day on Zoom, and yet you gave another hour of your time because you care this much about San Diego, and I appreciate it. Listen, you've already heard me tonight. I'm a proud native San Diegan. I have spent my entire career serving my community. While others want to criticize that, I think it's a proof point of relevant experience that actually will make me a good mayor. If the private sector was everything, I would point out that the president had his entire career in the private sector before going to the White House. That hasn't worked well for our country. And so I suggest that the relevant experience I have as your state legislator, as a city council member, will make me well prepared to take on the multiple challenges the next mayor of San Diego will face, from everything from COVID and the recession to economic and racial injustice to our climate crisis. My opponent has made several digs at me tonight. It's not uncommon, unfortunately. But I will never be accused of not pursuing a bold agenda. And forgive me for suggesting that there is no amount of homelessness that is appropriate in a city as wealthy as this one, in a state as wealthy as this one, in a country as wealthy as this one. And our goal ought to be to end chronic homelessness. And I do have a record of accomplishments. When people were lining up against me to stop raising minimum wages and providing paid sick days, we fought and we fought until we won. When they thought a climate action plan as big and as bold as the one that I proposed was impossible, we got it done on a unanimous bipartisan vote of the city council. My record of achievement is obvious, and I want to take that record and build upon it. I don't want to be just the guy who wrote the climate action plan. I want to be the mayor that gets it done. I want to be the mayor that makes sure that my hometown continues to be a place where the son of working class parents can grow up to be anything they want to be. I'm proud to be endorsed by our Democratic Party and leaders from up and down the state and across the nation. I believe that I'm best prepared to be the next mayor of San Diego, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
First of all, I resent the comparison to Donald Trump. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I've spent most of my life making phone calls, knocking on doors, and raising money for Democrats in San Diego. And this is the first time in the history of San Diego that 2 Democrats are in the final 2 for mayor. A year and a half ago, no one expected I would get to the final 2. They assumed that my opponent would. He was endorsed by the Democratic Party, and that there would be a Republican. We didn't know who. There was a Republican, but despite that, and despite the fact that they were both well-financed with special interests supporting them, I made it through the primary. I'm running for mayor because I really care about this city, because I want to bring accountability and transparency to City Hall. And I think it is very fair to point out honest policy differences between the 2 of us. My opponent does say he wants to end chronic homelessness downtown. That's what he said in 2012 when he was sworn in for a 2nd term on the San Diego City Council. At that time, and I'm reading data from the Downtown Partnership, there were 593 unsheltered individuals downtown. When he left 4 years later, that had more than doubled to 1,415. Today, that number is lower, still too high, unacceptable. And we did not discuss homelessness in depth tonight, but I do have a detailed plan that is available on my website. I believe that the diversity of my life experiences is what separates me from my opponent and what will allow me to lead this city at this pivotal time and to develop an economy, a healthy economy that includes all of our residents. That's why a key person in my office will be our school engagement coordinator, who will work on paid internships, particularly in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I've learned something unique from every part of my life, and I would be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of the Bankers Hill Community Group, the Claremont Town Council, and the League of Women Voters, I want to thank our candidates tonight for running for office and attending our forum this evening. Be sure to check out the League's calendar on the League's website for more events and forums. We're quite busy this election season. Be sure to mail your ballot by November 3rd and encourage others to do so. And thank you again. You are all here tonight because you are following the League motto, don't just be a voter, be an informed voter. Thank you all and good night.